The point of this podcast is to provide you with a more panoramic view on sports. I want you to see sports through a different lens, catch them from all angles. So at the end of the day, you can have a more holistic viewpoint in the world of sports. I'm not just talking about the traditional sports like basketball, baseball, football, even hockey and soccer, which we've talked about in the past. No, I want you to see all sports through a different lens. Today, we jump into the world of eSports, and my guest helps explain what he thinks will be the benefits and disadvantages of this evolution of esports in the world today. It's a really, really interesting topic, and I learned a ton. I know you will too. So tune in today on the Game Time Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time! Woo!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Game Time Guru. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I want to first start off by saying, if you want to follow me on social media, don't forget to go over to Twitter. You can find me at the Game Time Guru, and also I have an Instagram page, but that's at Game Time Guru without the at the beginning of it, so just at Game Time Guru on Instagram. I know it sounds strange, but I have been doing some stories on Instagram, so you can see some behind the scenes footage of what's going on in my, podcast life. So, anywho, as you guys know, you can find me on Anchor as well, the Anchor app. I have my own little station over there where I do daily quick takes and just talk sports with other, sports fans. And obviously iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play Music, and any other podcast platform you can think of, YouTube. You can find me there as well. Yes. So I would appreciate if you could find me, subscribe, and then share this with your friends and leave a review if you could, please. So today I brought a guest onto the show by the name of Scott Johnson. Now, Scott is a friend of mine from, years back when I was in high school. And I met Scott through a couple of mutual friends that we had. And the first memory I have of Scott is actually when we were playing basketball in high school, and a group of friends went over to our church, and we were just playing some pickup basketball over at the church. And I remember Scott coming over there, and all I knew of Scott was that he was a soccer player. That's all I knew. I knew he was a soccer player and that he liked soccer. That's all. But come to find out, Scott was also a really good basketball player. So, I mean, just through our friends, we were able to compete together and just play whenever we got the opportunity to play basketball together. Flash forward a few years later, and, we're both back home from, serving church missions and such. We're back home doing our thing. I see him again. We were playing some basketball. I think his brother came with us a few times. We were playing some pickup ball over at a local high school. And I got to know Scott even better and realized he's not just a soccer player or a basketball player. He also, will play baseball/softball. He also excels at football. He came onto our flag football team. So Scott was an athlete in all traditional sports. Then I find out that for his whole life, Scott's been, wakeboarding and doing all the extreme sports, snowboarding, wakeboarding, doing his thing there and excelling at those. So not only did he do traditional sports, but he also did extreme sports. And then a couple years ago, I find out that Scott moved, and I'm always asking my other friend, I'm like, what happened to Scott? Well, my friend tells me, well, he moved, and now he's streaming, playing video games and streaming them. Well, at the time, I was just like, what? That was my question. I was like, what in the heck does that mean? Like, what is he doing? He's playing video games? Like, what? So Scott, as I came to, become a little bit more knowledgeable about, the streaming world and how people, watch these video games and watch people play video games, I understood it a little bit better. I realized, man, so not only was he good at traditional sports and extreme sports, but he's also very good at what we would call the eSports, as the world is knowing it now. So he's what we call an all-purpose athlete. So, Scott, thank you for coming onto the show. I appreciate you being here with me today.
I appreciate the phone call and you letting me guest on your show. You chuckled a little bit when you talked about streaming or playing video games, and it's definitely a billion-dollar industry that's growing a ton, especially on Twitch. The part you chuckled on was watching video games, and Twitch is just huge, man. Bought out by Amazon and just growing and growing and growing.
So you're on Twitch then? So what do you do on Twitch? Explain that to the listeners, what you're doing with your streaming and how Twitch actually works.
All right. So let me go through a quick intro then. Like you were talking about, my name's Scott Johnson, like he was talking about. I go by Vope in the gaming world, and you can find me on twitch.tv at Vope. Let me see what it is. It's at Vope TV. So it's twitch.tv/VopeTV. Or I set up a website so you can watch me straight on Twitch from the website, just vope.tv. Same thing, you can find me on Twitter at VopeTV. And I just try to keep everything simple. Instagram, VopeTV, same thing. So we're just going to keep it VopeTV across all things. But what we do on Twitch is we stream or we play video games. It's growing a little more than just video games. Right now there's a whole directory dedicated to content creation. It's something where people are playing music on there or just creating their own music. They do a lot of graphic design work. A lot of creative designers are doing just graphic design work on the creative directory on Twitch. But it's pretty much just a live entertaining stream. So I stream 8 to 14 hours a day, playing video games all day long, from different kinds of video games like first-person shooters to that are Call of Duty style, all the way to World of Warcraft RPG style games. So I play absolutely every kind of video game you can imagine on my channel.
Man, that's awesome. And so you don't have to get into numbers or anything, but do you basically make a living doing this at this point? Like, is that how you get by every day since you're putting so much time and effort into it? Is that your full-time job?
Yeah, I definitely put in at a minimum 40 hours a week, on an average 60 hours a week in setting up stream and streaming. If you want to count like the number of hours I'm playing and streaming, it's definitely in the 60 to 90 hour range because, all I do is eat, drink, and sleep video games. Other than that, you take a little bit of time off for yourself, but most of the time you just enjoy going back to playing video games. I do make a living. I would call it right now, I'm a little bit on the smaller side, and I would definitely call it a little bit below living, but I'm fortunate enough in my life to have a passive income coming in as well.
That's awesome, man. Okay, so as you guys can see, Scott's pretty passionate about what he's doing, and that's why I wanted to bring him onto the show, because he's pretty knowledgeable in the field of video games. He knows how to game. He knows a lot about gaming. So we're going to jump into a couple of topics. First one being, I want to know your thoughts, Scott, on the whole name of eSports, because I know that you and I have discussed this in the past, and you had mentioned something that you had an opinion on the name of eSports. Can you give us your opinion on, what you think about the name eSports? Is it a sport? Is video gaming a sport? What's your thoughts?
Absolutely. So being an athlete myself, sport is kind of like, you think of baseball, football, basketball, even golf and tennis and anything like that. It's something that requires a lot of athletics. And I think it waters down the name sport a little bit by calling it eSports. I mean, obviously I'm an avid video game player, but it doesn't mean that it should take the place of sports. I appreciate what eSports is doing for the world, but to call it eSports is a little much for me, because let me put it this way, Shane. So if you're wanting to be a baseball player, let's talk about Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper is a national star, right? International even, and he's just an incredible baseball player. Ever since he was a kid, maybe 3 years old, his parents have raised him, and he has spent everything, eating, drinking, and sleeping baseball. He's been learning baseball and training for baseball his entire life. So because he was able to train for baseball through those 18 years, and then 18 years in, he's able to become a professional baseball player, how are you supposed to do that with eSports? In the eSports world, sure, you could start at the age of 3 and start playing video games, but being good at Super Mario Bros. On the Nintendo is not the same as being a great PC gamer in this day and age. You can't really start at the age of 3 and train to play Call of Duty, because by the time you're 18, Call of Duty is no longer a professional esport. Now you've got to play Overwatch, or you've got to play PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or you got to play For Honor. So the game is constantly changing, and I don't see how it can be called esports when it's not an actual sport, because it's just constantly changing. The sport changes every 5 years. Every 5 years, a new game is developed and put out. That's the new competitive professional scene. And you can't just jump from one to the next and one to the next.
I like that. So basically, you're saying it's not as consistent. So it's not as consistent as other sports. Basketball is the sport of basketball, and while the game will evolve from throughout time, like now you see basketball players, it's a little bit faster speed. The big man in basketball isn't as relevant as it used to be. The sport itself is the same, so you can start from a young age practicing that sport and still be able to, it's the same sport when you're 18 as it is when you're 4 or 5, or in your example, 3 years old. But as far as video games, there's no way to actually be consistent because it changes so often. Is that what you were saying?
Exactly. It would be closer to, which does happen quite often, where people are dual sport athletes, like Bo Jackson, or even watching Tim Tebow try to come over and play baseball, or Michael Jordan going to play baseball. Sure, they're athletic people, so they have those skills to play multiple sports, but just because Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player on earth doesn't mean he was able to transfer that over to being the greatest baseball player on earth. And that's kind of how the games change in eSports. You can be the greatest Call of Duty player in the world, but you can't just switch and become the greatest World of Warcraft player ever. Sure, you can be decent at it, but those skills don't translate because you're not able to spend your whole life training for that.
Gotcha. That's a really, really good point there. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Now, you also said that while you were explaining your answer, you did mention that you do appreciate what esports is bringing to the world. With that being said, just recently in the last couple of months, the University of Utah, which is a Pac-12 university, a Power 5 conference, actually mentioned, and then they stated that they will be including esports as a varsity sport, meaning they can give out, scholarships or partial scholarships for gamers to play for their, so they'll have a team. And I think they are starting with League of Legends. I think that's the game they mentioned. I believe, I could be wrong there because I was reading a couple articles today. I could be getting them crossed. But so there's already a few schools that have esports as a varsity sport, but with Utah being the first major conference school to accept it, they're expecting more and more schools to start, bringing them in and allowing this to be a major thing. I kind of want your thoughts on that as esports are becoming an actual college sport and a collegiate sport where you can get an athletic scholarship per se to go and play. What are your thoughts on that?
I actually think it's great for not only the gaming world, but just the world in general, because as people are developing those skills, you mentioned League of Legends. So two of the longest lasting games right now that are professional are League of Legends, which I think is going on its 8th year now of being a really, really high end game. It's the number one streamed game on Twitch all day long, every day. It is just huge. There are hundreds of thousands of people watching League of Legends all day long. I believe, I'm throwing this statistic out there because I've heard it from multiple sources, but I can't tell you 100% that it was true. But there were triple the number of people watching League of Legends during the last Super Bowl than the number of people watching the Super Bowl. So League of Legends is definitely growing. Calling it or bringing it in as a scholarship sport is good because the more publicity esports is getting or athletic scholarships are getting, then the more publicity the rest of the sports are going to be getting, and those schools can grow. So a lot of the bigger schools that make a ton of their money and are able to give out lots of scholarships, getting free education and different things like that, instead of just constant taxes, is we're able to donate to those athletic scholarships, and then those schools grow. So say one of the greatest players in the world goes to play League of Legends at University of Utah. Now a lot of people are watching that, and the school is actually going to start making money off of that. And since the school is making money, the rest of the school grows, including all of their other athletics. So in my opinion, it's good for everybody. It doesn't hurt anybody for that to be going on.
My first thoughts as an outsider here was, there are a lot of kids that are gaming, and you'll always hear the parents that are, apprehensive about that. And they'll say, you need to put down the controller and go do something useful with your life and stuff like that. You'll hear those parents that are crazy. Well, I think this also gives them an opportunity to actually look forward to something like those kids that are playing video games. Well, maybe that'll actually help them. They can go and get an education by doing that. Just like, some kids, they play football all their life. They might not be the best in the classroom, but it gives them an opportunity or a pathway. It opens the door for them to gain a higher education. And I think I think it's another opportunity for kids to be able to get a higher education by doing something that they're really good at. Now, going along with that, outside of college sports, are actually going to be introducing esports into the Olympics going forward. That's been the discussions that have been happening lately. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as that's concerned? Because I don't know the ins and outs of it right now, because I was reading up on it today. It seems like you don't necessarily have to have gone to college for that. I mean, there's a lot of people that never got the opportunity to go to college for esports, and they're already past that. But like, what do you think about that as far as being an Olympic sport and how that can actually change it, not only for the schools here, obviously, but for the worldwide publicity of esports?
It's something that I've thought a lot about, and hearing about it, and it's something, to be completely honest with you, I go back and forth on. I feel like it waters down sports. Throwing it out there as an esport, Olympics is it's the top tier. It's the best of the best. Like it's a huge deal to get a gold medal as an Olympian. But the more we throw out there, like it's on the edge of becoming participation awards for everyone. Where we're just going to create so many sports that almost everybody has competed and almost everyone has succeeded. But at the same time, you have to be very talented to get out there and be coordinated enough to play at that level in esports. So I don't know if it should be in the Olympics, but it should definitely be a worldwide event.
I respect that a lot. Yeah, okay, I like that. So if you're listening to this is why I brought Scott onto the show, because while he is, like he said, an avid gamer, he has, a wide knowledge on all sports for that matter, and he understands the pros and cons of esports growing. So to go along with this some more, let's dive into this discussion. How do you think that the evolution of gaming will affect the youth coming up? Because I'll just be honest, I just played in a basketball tournament this last weekend, and we were talking with a young guy. We noticed there was a lot less teams that actually participated, fewer teams that participated in this tournament compared to years past. And we were talking to one of the kids who plays, at a community college in a different state. I think it was over in Oregon. And he said, yeah, they're hurting for basketball players. They can't recruit as many anymore because there's not as many coming up through the high schools. There's not as much talent going on. And a lot of people think that it's just the generation. They're getting more and more into video games. So what are your thoughts here? Do you think that it negatively impacts other traditional, quote unquote, sports since we're seeing this evolution of esports?
Speaking a little bit bluntly, I don't think so, because I do watch a lot of professional sports, and I don't think I've seen maybe one or two professional or even elite level video game players, esports athletes, that would even be able to compete with me. And I'm nowhere near, if anything, at the low level of junior college athlete. And I don't think that I've seen any avid athlete esports e-athletes. Is that a thing?
No, it sounds good to me.
I'm just saying, I don't think that it's slowing things down. I do think that you and I grew up in an age where there were some of the most talented people on the planet coming up into college sports, and so we might just see a little bit of a drought here. But that's just my take on it. I don't think that video games are pulling people away from it. The younger kids that I do know that are very good at esports, some of them also play football or also play basketball, and when they come to play esports, it's their second thing. It's, if football is not going to work out, then I'll go play. But they don't ever blow off football to come play video games with me. Does that make sense? I don't think that people are going to be blowing off college athletics for video games.
No, I got you. So the numbers are pretty rare as far as those. Like, pretty much if you're a video gamer and you're an avid gamer, what you're saying is you're seeing that those people that are very avid, that they're going to be focused on that specific sport. There's not a lot that are like yourself. There's not a ton that are like yourself that are like, that are doing all of them. But there are a few, and the ones who do, play traditional sports, typically the video games are their secondary sport. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, Shane, I'm just out there looking for a good time. So I'm not looking to be a professional baseball player. I just want to play baseball and have a good time. And so when I get to that level of competition that's equal to my own, I move on to the next thing. And so I like to play everything and kind of dabble in everything because it's just more fun for me. And a lot of the people, so the difference here in athletics versus e-athletics is the people that are playing esports. I'm a big fan of esports growing the way it is because it's such a huge stress relief. Everyone needs stress relief in their life. And for me, I can go play in a pickup game of basketball because I get the ball, I'm at the top of the key, and you get into a pressure or panic situation. And the only thing you're thinking about is, am I going to go left or right on this guy? What am I going to do? Or even defensively, how am I going to steal the ball from this guy? It's the only thought in your head at that moment, which is huge stress relief because you're not thinking about everyday life. Oh my gosh, am I making enough money? Am I going to be able to feed my kids this week? You need to have that stress relief in life. A lot of people aren't as fortunate as you and I to have that same athletic skill to go out and do that. If they go out there, they're still just thinking about everyday life because they're not good enough to compete or athletic enough to compete. So with video games coming up, there's a whole nother option for kids who for me, a lot of my friends are, I guess I shouldn't say a lot of my friends. I know a few autistic people who have a hard time in sports, but they're doing a great job in esports, and it's a huge stress relief for them. It's something that they can go to and compete in and think only of that moment. And what am I going to do here? How am I going to kill this wizard? This is the only thing that they're thinking about, and it's just enormous stress relief, and it's super, super good for mental health. And I can't push mental health enough.
The mental health aspect, that's huge. So I appreciate you bringing that part up. Man, so I guess with that being said, and I want to talk about some of the benefits to go along with that of gaming, in the sense of you always hear that hand-eye coordination is better for gamers. A lot of the military people look for that. What are your thoughts on that? What are the benefits outside of that, to dive a little bit deeper into the mental health aspect or whatever other skills it teaches you? What do you think about gaming and the benefits from it?
I think it's really good for people as long as they're finding physical activity in their life. You obviously can't just substitute full physical activity for video games. It's just not a healthy way to live. But mentally, it's great. So something for me, as far as hand-eye coordination goes, that you were talking about, is this sounds really, really, really far-fetched. But when I was a little kid, I played video games as well, right? And so I'm playing video games, and Mom kept telling me, you only get an hour a day, or, that didn't work out very well. There's always the little kid getting up in the middle of the night to play video games type stuff. But I wasn't not playing sports because of it. Anyways, my mom had found an article a couple years later, after not letting me play very much, that totally changed her opinion on it. And it was an article scientifically proving that people who play video games are actually better drivers and are better in sports because it creates hand-eye coordination, like you talked about. And to me, it's hard to take somebody who is not very coordinated and throw them into a pickup match of basketball and then get better. It doesn't really teach them hand-eye coordination. It's kind of something you have or you don't have. In video games, I've actually noticed mine get better. As I started doing better in video games and started, as far as first-person shooters go, sorry, this is actually all directed at first-person shooter video games. It created great hand-eye coordination for me, and it actually made me start succeeding a little more in the athletic.
Man, this whole entire discussion is actually opening my eyes to this whole world even more. See, this is why I brought you on, man. I appreciate you giving us the insight. So, and I can see that, this is honestly, so just so you know, Scott, you know our friend Logan. And Logan and we bought this domain for a website called allpurposeathletes.com. That's ours. We own it. And we're hoping to do something with that someday. We've owned it for the last 2 years. And we always talk about, what's an all-purpose athlete? So in any of our city league games, anything we ever compete in, even our 3-on-3 basketball tournament we just had this weekend, we always put the name all-purpose athletes. That's always typically our name, unless we're being sponsored by somebody. But yeah, all-purpose athletes is our name because we hope that one day we can grow that brand. But when we always said, what is an all-purpose athlete? I'm like, Scott Johnson is an all-purpose athlete. And it's kind of funny because like my whole life I'm like, dude, this guy can do everything, like on a basketball court and everything. And now I can kind of see what you're saying, where it stems from. Now, I don't necessarily say it's all from video games, but I can see where you were like, you're just coordinated with everything you're doing. It's just, you're an all-purpose athlete. And I think it's actually legit to hear like your story growing up and, and how, video gaming can actually help you and did help you going forward. I think that's freaking rad, man. So thank you for explaining all that, and I hope the listeners can actually gain something from this too, because it's definitely helping me. Do you have any? So you like first-person shooters? What about like the sports games and such? What's your favorite games you play?
Yeah, so it definitely changes all the time. Something I was really into that I've probably put the most hours into is a game called Destiny, and even our friend Logan, you mentioned, you brought up, who is a huge athlete. He really likes Destiny. He plays Destiny a lot. That's a first-person shooter. As far as some of the other games go, I actually play League of Legends. I enjoyed that for a little while. It got a little bit too heated. People were a little bit too rude to other people in that game. It gets really competitive. And one of the sad things or hard things that we need to, in the eSports world, get over is, if you go play pickup basketball, you're not going to just get in the face of somebody and start talking trash to him because he made a bucket. Like the guy scores on you, you don't get in a fight with him. But in esports, since you're kind of safe behind your monitor in your own house and nobody's going to do anything about it, people are so rude to one another. Not to say everybody is, and usually when something hard comes up, nobody's excessive about it, and everyone comes to their aid. So some people have gone through hard times with depression, and people totally flip like that, going from being very toxic players to being very, very kind and uplifting. So when it comes down to it, people are nice people, but we need to get over in the esports world how we treat each other in a normal pickup game instead of showing respect to one another. You used to box, didn't you, Shane? Or you still box?
Correct.
So after you boxed with somebody, did you hate them or did you have so much respect for them afterwards?
Oh man, boxing, I actually gained a ton of respect for people. That's how I mellowed out a lot, actually. But yeah, boxing, I would have a ton of respect for somebody after the fight, because obviously you're going to battle with them for a couple rounds and you get a couple shots. But no, like I never was really, I shouldn't say never, but I wasn't like mad at somebody after the match. You pretty much respect the other individual.
Right, and that's something in sports for me that I think is missing from esports before it can become as big as it should be, if that makes sense to you. But that's just coming from my moral side and my moral standpoint.
In any kind of like gaming or internet type world, we deal with like cyberbullying all the time. And so if you have those, what we would call keyboard warriors, the ones who talk behind their computer screen all the time, I mean, you do run that risk of, having like you're pretty much protected by that, like you said. So I could see that, and I can see why that would be an issue. So hopefully, like, do you have any advice as to like what could we do to help that scenario, help limit those people from being rude and disrespectful while they're gaming? What can we do to even help solve that problem, since it's such it's a worldwide, gaming, it's just a worldwide sport. What can we even do to change that?
I think the biggest thing to do is most games are going out of their way to help out. For example, I was talking about League of Legends being kind of one of the most toxic environments of people being very rude to one another. The best thing you can do is report the other player. Instead of getting in a fight with them, just report them and actually write in the comments what happened and how that person just decided to be toxic towards you for no reason or for the reason of being good. It's very, very rarely that I play a video game and do really well. Say we just go on a major kill streak in a first-person shooter. The game ends. The messages I get aren't, dude, that was amazing, great work. The message that you usually get is you're trash or you're garbage. And what's the point of that? If I played I keep bringing up pickup ball, but it seems like the most relevant to me is you go play a game of pickup ball, and afterwards you did really well. The other team usually congratulates you and talks to you and wants to be buddy-buddy with you. It's completely the other way around in video games. So I think the thing to do is to make sure you report those players, because League of Legends does it, Destiny does it. Most of those big video game developers, they'll ban or they'll definitely penalize the player if they're reported too many times. I know I even have friends who do it. They message other people just out of nowhere, and they're totally toxic people. They have been communication banned multiple times, and I have one friend who can't play Overwatch, is one of the biggest games out there, right? And he can't even get into a match. He has like a 3-hour queue anytime he wants to just go play. So he pretty much can't play Overwatch anymore because he's been reported so many times. So as long as we stay on top of reporting people and ignoring them instead of getting into a fight with them, I think it's going to make a huge difference.
Okay. So you just kind of have to, it's pretty much on the gamers themselves to kind of help this toxic environment become a little bit better. So I like that. Man, I've learned so much in this discussion. So Scott, wrapping up, man, do you have any other topics you'd like to discuss before we, end the show today? Is there anything else you'd like to touch base on?
Yeah, I know we've talked about a lot about coordination and just people playing video games in general. The one last thing I want to mention, I know I've been talking quite a bit, but the one big important thing to remember is how much it helps people. So there are the few people that video games might hurt as far as depression or addiction goes, but the same goes with regular athletics as well. It's not healthy to be addicted to anything that way. So you got to make sure you're getting up and getting your physical activity. But the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about really quick, and going into this whole conversation, you telling me, I'd like you to guest and talk about eSports a little bit. The one big thing that I didn't want to leave out is how important video games are to the ill. A lot of people that are hospitalized and going through Crohn's disease or anything terrible like that, their one relief in life is getting to lay in that bed and play video games and watch their favorite streamers on Twitch. And the Twitch community goes above and beyond for those people. I believe the Destiny community just in itself raised, was it $1.5 million in 1 week just for the children fighting cancer. And it was just incredible to see what people can come together to do. And I just wanted to point out that a lot of those people who can't go out and play baseball because they're bedridden with illness, they've at least got video games in their lives.
Man, thank you so much for bringing that up. That is huge because, that's the same thing we always say about all sports. It helps people because of this and this and this. But for those people who don't have the ability to do anything physical, it definitely gives them something that they can do and something that they can succeed at. So I appreciate you bringing that piece up. I don't think a lot of people actually think about that. And if they do, they don't really dwell on it at all. Sometimes this is why I want to, the point of my podcast is to bring all sports in here, right? And just give a whole, what I say, a panoramic view on sports, or, a bird's eye view, just open it up and discuss them, because it's more than just a video game in this case. There are so many things that branch out from video games, and you touched base on them today, which I greatly appreciate, Scott. And hopefully we can talk about this more in the future. But like I said, I appreciate you joining the show with me today, man. And we'll be talking. If you guys want to go follow Scott, it's at Vope TV. Is that right, Scott? At Vope TV? Yeah. At Vope TV. And that's V as in Victor, O as in Oscar, P as in Paul, E as in Edward, TV. So go find him on Twitch. Go find him on Twitter. Just like he said earlier, you can find his handles and go find him. And if you want to look at the description here on the podcast, it's written down here so you can see it for all of his handles where you can find him at. So this has been a great discussion, Scott. I appreciate you coming on. And for all the listeners, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks again, Shane.